Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 2 of my Revenge of the Creature build, the X Plus kit. I complete the figure in this video just in time for Halloween, which is today. I won't finish the entire build today, obviously, but I did want to try to get the creature done in time. I'm not a big stickler on having to have my Halloween build done by Halloween day, but this definitely is my Halloween one, since it's a horror figure from Revenge of the Creature, the sequel to Creature from the Black Lagoon. So really happy with how the creature turned out, using the various shades of acrylics over it, and then it turned out really nicely with the various oils that I used and that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so I'm beginning painting on the creature, Revenge of the Creature, Creature from Black Lagoon. I'm starting with these two darker greens, Gunship Green from Vallejo Model Air and Russian Green. Russian Green's a little more on the yellowish side. So what I'm doing is, let me get the creature, I'll show you. So I'm just holding him on his base. I'm going to paint over the base anyway and add some other material. So what I started with was the more yellowish on his stomach, because that's going to lean more towards the yellow or the mustard kind of a look. And also on his fin in the back, his other little fins on his body to make it a little bit darker. And then the other green I'm going with on the rest of the scales, just kind of patchwork on it, just as a darker undercoating. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over those colors with the sand yellow for the stomach. And I'm going to do this DE green, really light green, over the rest of them. And these are just the base colors. So that's going to give me a little bit of different color variations within the main body. And then I'm going to work on the other approaches. So, all right, so I got an initial base coat of those different colors that I mentioned, and they're very subtle. So this is not how he's going to ultimately look. He's going to have quite a few layers on him and various techniques. The initial thing I'm doing, of course, is just to get the general colors down, which is just two of them pretty much. The darker green, or the dark and light green variations for his main body, the more of a yellowish tone towards his stomach, and some darker looks on different parts of his gills and his hands and feet and that sort of thing. So what I'm doing right now is, now that I have that done, I have some thinner in a little plastic cup with some Q-tips. And so I went back, some really fantastic detail in the actual like scales of his body, as you can see there. So what I did was I put some alcohol in the Q-tip, damped it off on a paper towel. I'm almost doing like a reverse dry brushing. So rubbing it lightly over it reveals the surface of these scaly parts, taking the paint off of it and revealing the paint underneath. I did a little bit on the back too, just to kind of test it. You can see there. I'm kind of playing with that idea. So I'm going to go over that just lightly over the different scale parts to reveal some of that detail, and then kind of see how I like how that looks. So the main techniques I want to generally use on here are going to be the various shadings with an airbrush, then like this kind of thing where I reveal some of the detail underneath. I'm also going to use some oils. And before I do any of that, once I get the main look down to where I want it to be, I'm going to put a clear coat on this, like a satin coat, because the oils will just soak right into the flat paint if I don't. And then I want to go back in and just highlight underneath the edges of the plating, as it were, to make them look a little bit darker. I may even use some weathering powders potentially. I have this one here, which has some yellow in it. There's some green. and just use that a little bit as well. So the key to it is just a lot of different layered looks to get the final look, because he's pretty much just all one color mostly, but to make him look more realistic and look more interesting, I want to have some different shadings and different colors, so that when you look at him from a distance, he looks kind of one color, but when you get closer, you can see some individual different shades and things like that. So to make him interesting. And then on the base and on the chains and the fish and the anchor and those kind of things, I'm going to do some techniques that bring out some different colors and metallics and that sort of thing, to add a little bit of color to pop on the diorama, to take away from just the sheer green. All right, so let me continue working on him and getting some more detail on him. All right, so I used a bunch of Q-tips and I did a light removal of some of the paint to show the scale detail over the whole figure. So I definitely like this approach, and it's going to ultimately be the best way to do that, and to show the scaly detail over whatever color I end up with. So what I want to do now is, I think he's still a little too dark, because ultimately I want the separations on these platings to be darker and more pronounced than the rest of them. And I'm still not happy with this color. So it's really hard to find color photographs or color images of this creature or the costume, because the film was in black and white back in the 50s. All three of them were. And so I haven't really seen any. I do have one photo that I found, but to be honest, I don't even know if it was colorized or if it's accurate, but I do like the way that the creature looks in it. So let me show you that image, and I'm going to kind of use that as my image that I want to go with. And again, some of you may share with me and say, no, he doesn't look like that, and there's some images, but it's really hard to find anything that I can trust or rely upon. And so I can use a lot of license as far as how I ultimately want him to look. And I think if he looks realistic, it's pretty clear from a lot of the posters of the films that he was supposed to be green, which I'm guessing is more of an alligator look, because a lot of his the scales and the texture and those kind of things remind you of an alligator, like the fins in the back there, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of that onto him. But exactly what colors he was and how he looks is really hard to say. But let me show you the image that I did find, and then I'm going to try to use as far as how I want him to look as far as the colors are concerned. All right, so as you can see in this picture here, a lot brighter green, and then of course the dark portions there. It looks like the darker parts are at the edges of the plates that are overlap rather than under the plates, which is what I thought. So this is what I'm trying to imitate, along with the yellow colors. All right, so just to kind of better explain what I'm talking about. So I thought that the darker would be like this part underneath this overlapping plate, but it seems like it's more on top. It's the edge part that overlaps. So I would actually paint along this part rather than underneath it, kind of a thing. And certainly certain parts are darker, like it looks like this whole piece underneath here is a lot darker, to emphasize it. But definitely different colors than the greens that I have right now. They're far too muted. So what I've got here is I have some Tamiya, and I have yellow green, which will be primarily used on his abdomen part. And then I just have flat green, which I'm going to use for the rest of him. Plus I also want to probably mix a little bit of this with some of this to do just like a little bit of highlighting at the main parts of these different panels, to try to get that that look that I showed in the image. And again, you know, some people might post in the comments and say, well, Ken, that's not accurate, and where's the I don't know what's accurate. I don't have an accurate image. It's a black and white film, so in the end I'm going to try to come up with an image that looks close to what I see in the film. Certainly the shading will be right and that type of thing. I'm not really certain what the colors are, and so in the end I'm just going to go with what looks good on him and stick within like the green and yellowish tones of the creature. So let me go ahead and get some more paint onto him, and then I'm probably going to just repeat the same process with the Q-tips and bring about some of the shading. The end goal is that I want the main parts of these plates to be a lighter, more in the yellow-green spectrum or the lighter green spectrum, and then once I do the oils, there'll be the dark parts that will highlight the various panels and bring those to life. And then a similar type of thing. So you're still going to see the bit sticking through, but overall I want him to be a lighter, more yellowish green than he is right now. Because if I put the dark oils onto this, it's going to get lost in these darker green colors. I want it to be overall a lighter green to start with, and then the oils will bring that down and darken it as well. All right. All right, so I applied on some of the yellow green from Tamiya, dry brushing basically over the centers of a lot of these plated panels. Kind of gives it a cool tiger stripe look at this point. Gives a little more character to them. So now that these have dried, I'm going to go back and do it again, get a little brighter look to it, a little bit lighter. Sorry, it's awkward. A little bit lighter base, so when I put on the oils over the edges of these, they'll be more distinct and it'll stand out a little bit more. All right, but looking really cool, giving him some distinction of colors. A little bit more in the layers, so definitely coming along to getting to where I want it to be. All right, so I've completed the second round of doing the yellow-green to make it a little brighter, giving him that striped look. Definitely getting much closer to what I want it to be. Sorry. Giving him some distinctive colors between his skin patterns. And I definitely want it to be lighter, just a little bit lighter, because when I put the darker green oils, I want it to be obvious that there's a distinction between the two of them. And I can always do a blending coat at the end if I need to, but for right now, I'm heading in the right direction. So what I'm going to do at this point, this is dried sufficiently. I'm going to go ahead and use some Vallejo medium yellow and do one more pass, but I'm going to focus on the centers just to give it a little bit more distinction. So not the whole, I'm not going to cover the whole parts that are there. I'm going to try my best to just do like the center, just to give that just a little more brighter yellow. Over the entire thing again. And then I'll come back. And I'm thinking of putting maybe a flat coat, some kind of a clear coat over it, because I don't want the oils, first of all, the thinner for the oils to take off any of the paint, but I also don't want it to just soak right into the flat colors. They were a little bit on the glossy side. Not really glossy, but I wouldn't really call them flat per se, even though I'm using flat colors. I'm not sure why they still have more of a sheen to them. But we'll play with that. I might do a little bit of testing before I do that as well. So, okay. Okay, so I'm finalizing the details on my creature. Revenge of the Creatures from Black Lagoon. So I've now turned to some Abtielung 502 oils, which I really like a lot. And these are great because they're very strongly pigmented, very strong pigments. And what you can do is, I have this little paint tray and I put some over here. So I have some sand yellow, I have some olive green, and some oil, engine oil, which is a darker look. And I have some odorless thinner, which is like paint thinner basically, but it's odorless. It's not odorless, but it's not as strong as your typical stuff that you use. And you have to use that for this, since these are oil paints. And you can put them on very thick, or you can put them on really thin like a wash, and you can determine how thick you want them to be. And then what I'm doing is I'm dabbing it off on a paper towel. This is my second paper towel. The other one I totally covered, and on a second batch of it. A couple different brushes, different sizes. And so what I'm doing is I'm going back over just the overlapping plate sections, kind of on top of them, but a little bit underneath, with the olive green. And I go over the whole thing with that. And then I go back over with some of the sand yellow in the middle and kind of blend it together somewhat. So it gives it a much more natural look. And you're still getting those scales in the actual kit, which is really cool. Let me turn it around here. All right, I started working on the front a little bit. Still going to do some more of that. I put the engine oil, the darker, between his fingers, the little webbing between them, to make that look darker. Set the focus. And I already did some of the olive green over his fins on his back and his arms and legs. I'm going to do a little darker on that too, and just play with that. So the key to this is just a lot of layering, a bunch of different colors that eventually come out to be a more realistic look on him. I still haven't done anything with his mouth or eyes. I'll do those at the end. I've also done his gills a little bit with the darker, so I'll work on those as well. Yeah, but I really like that. I like how it looks like it's stained in a way, which is what the costume looks like. I think they did it on purpose to give him more of a natural look, like he's underwater and a lot of the dirt and debris and things like that. So, okay, let me continue on him and finish up the figure at this point. All right, so I got his mouth painted. A little bit of white and red for the back part of his mouth and those little flaps there in his mouth, and some red with his tongue. His eyes, I had to do a couple of times. They were kind of tricky. There is some pretty good indentations down in there for the dark part, but it's just hard to get it painted. The outer part is flesh. I didn't want to do white. I just did flesh. And then I had to go back with like a toothpick and put the black in it. Might do a little bit more cleanup on that. I did put some clear green over top of it, Tamiya green, but you can't really see it because of the black. But I think it looks pretty good. I really like the various tones of color with the oils, like on his head there, as you can see. His gills. They're still a little glossy because I had just finished up a little bit more on it and it's still drying, but it looks pretty cool. There's his claws, and I put some flesh over the claws as well. And that's Vallejo flesh tone. So it's not quite the darker flesh tone that you get from Tamiya. His other claw. I like the variation in the yellows on his abdomen. And I use some oils as well on the creases to bring those out and highlight them. And it's just a subtle enough shade difference between the greens and also the same cream color and or yellows of his plating there. And his bottom feet, his feet and his claws there, the toenails. Okay, let's turn him around. All right, so a lot of nice, really nice color variation in the greens. And this is his scales. I put different dark shades onto them to make those stand out as well. The oils worked really, really well to finally blend together the different shades of colors, the lighter and the darker part of the plating, so it doesn't stand out as being too obvious or too glaring. I think it looks really great. Looks nice and subtle, but it gives you a lot of really good character in his appearance. In the back of his head. Once I get the base done, I may do a little bit more shading. I'm going to let this all dry and set up, the oils to fully set up. That'll give me the final colors that I want to see. And these oils I put over a dull coat rather than a semi-gloss or a gloss, and I think that worked fine. It didn't quite sink in, and it protected the paint underneath. I just used a spray can of dull coat to protect the enamel, the acrylic paints underneath, so the stronger, odorless thinner would not remove it. So, all right, but looking fantastic. All right, so that's going to wrap up this build. Really coming along nicely. I will finish up the base in the next video. I do have a couple of ideas on what I'm going to do as far as adding some scenic sand to it and a little bit of extra shrubbery and certainly adding some other colors and things that will make the model pop, such as rusted metallic for the anchor and the chains, and the fish will be multicolored and that kind of thing, and then of course sand and rocks on the bottom. So all right, so really happy with how this is coming out and how the creature has turned out. I may do a few little minor tweaks once I get the base going as well. But thank you to all my new subscribers. Happy Halloween to everyone. Watch a horror movie. I'm going to watch a few tonight myself, and I will see you the next time.